This remarkable manhua begins on a dark, stormy night in an ancient Chinese residence. Several men dressed in black robes stand in a line. Someone asks if anyone is present. Rain has pooled into a puddle from the endless downpour. A filthy child stands in the rain, facing the men in black robes. Their stillness is disconcerting. A man with crimson eyes observes the boy intently, wondering how anyone could be living in the abandoned martial academy. Addressing him as a young warrior, the man politely asks for permission to take shelter from the rain for the night. The boy examines them, curious about who they might be. It surprises him that they are speaking to him so respectfully despite his young age. He reasons that they might see him as a young Taoist protecting the closed academy. In response, he greets them and thinks that perhaps they aren't dangerous people. He explains that he too only started living in the abandoned academy a few years ago, adding that they may stay wherever they wish, just not in his pavilion. The men thank the young warrior for his generosity. Their leader instructs them to avoid the boy's pavilion and find other spots for shelter. He asks if they understand, and they all respond affirmatively before dispersing to find their own spaces. The boy notices the word Tang embroidered on their robes and wonders if they belong to the same clan. Though curious about their identity, he has more pressing matters to attend to. Entering his pavilion, he busies himself with preparing dinner for the children. The somber atmosphere shifts as the boy becomes animated with joy. Our protagonist enthusiastically calls everyone to eat. Opening a large pot, he reveals a small, brown, cricket-like insect inside, remarking that he was nearly late and the insects must be starving. In another pot, he finds a large spider called the black earth tiger, a tarantula native to Hainan, China. This impressive species, which can grow up to 20 centimeters long, features unique stripes resembling those of a black tiger. Using chopsticks, the boy carefully picks up an insect to feed the spider. While feeding it, he reflects on how he wouldn't have survived without these creatures. The tarantula eagerly eats the insect, pleasing the boy. He marvels at how this spider, once the size of a fingernail, has already shed its shell twice and grown so much. Feeling happy, he notes that the spider has had its fill. Next, the boy opens a drawer to reveal an orange lizard with white stripes, a bewangling cave gecko. This species is native to the region and recognized by its striped body and tail. The boy recalls how difficult it was to acquire such creatures in his previous life when he lacked money. Now he can find them everywhere. His life is filled with joy as he watches over them. While feeding the gecko, it bites his finger. Yelling loudly, he waves his hand to shake it off, but the gecko clings stubbornly. This incident reminds him of his past. Before inhabiting this body, the boy was a streamer named Spicy Fabre, a professional biologist with over 1 million subscribers. His content focused on venomous creatures, and his final live broadcast became his undoing. In a quest to showcase the 10 most dangerous vipers, he embarked on a journey to find the black mamba, known for its aggressive nature. During the live stream, he lamented that he couldn't find the snake and decided to take a break. Viewers joked about the possibility of it being in his house, but to his shock, the black mamba was indeed there, curled up on his refrigerator. Before he could react, it bit him and he died instantly during the broadcast. Returning to the present, the boy pouts, reflecting on the irony of his death after such an exhaustive search. Meanwhile, an elderly man in a black robe knocks on the pavilion door. Thanking the boy for his kindness, he invites him to share their meal, a freshly caught deer. Excited at the prospect of eating proper meat rather than snakes or lizards, the boy eagerly accepts the invitation. The group gathers around a bonfire as the deer cooks. Noticing the boy's intense gaze at the food, the elder reassures him that it will take time to cook. To pass the time, he begins asking the boy questions about his age and living situation. Embarrassed but obliging, the boy answers his inquiries. The boy felt embarrassed when he realized he'd been staring at the deer for too long. Allowing the elder to ask his questions, he listened attentively. The elder wanted to know if the boy lived alone and how old he was. Unsure if he was 14 or 15, the boy decided to fabricate a story, claiming that a childhood head injury had left him with poor memories. When asked if he was staying there by himself, the boy confirmed, explaining that he lacked any real talent and survived by catching snakes and selling their skins. The elder expressed disbelief that the boy engaged in such dangerous work, but the boy simply shrugged, saying he was used to it. Just then, someone brought over some cooked meat for them to eat. An old man commented on how hungry the young warrior must have been. The boy gratefully thanked the elder, happily noting it had been ages since he'd last eaten meat. As he took a bite, pure joy spread across his face. In his mind, he thought, this is what happiness feels like. The older men watched him with smiles, their amusement evident. As he ate, the elders took the opportunity to ask more questions. The elder explained that they were searching for something unusual and wanted to know if the boy had seen anything strange. Initially hesitant, the elder eventually decided it was safe to share the details since the boy lived alone and wouldn't cause trouble. The patriarch explained they were looking for a centipede with a blue spot on its body. Surprised, the boy asked how large the centipede was. The patriarch explained that an adult could easily swallow someone his size. Pale with shock, the boy realized his assumption that he'd been transported only a few centuries into the past might be wrong. He could be in an entirely different world. The white-haired elder reassured him, saying they were close to capturing the creature. Curious, the boy asked if they intended to keep it as a pet. The question amused the elders and the white-haired man burst into laughter. The patriarch chuckled, commenting on how funny the young warrior was. Through laughter, the elder clarified that raising the centipede wasn't their goal, they needed it for medicinal purposes. Confused, the boy probed further. Initially suspecting them of being traitors, he began wondering if they were involved in illegal drug making. He asked how a centipede could serve as medicine. The elder explained that his granddaughter was gravely ill, and only the inner core of the blue spot centipede could save her. Moved by their determination, the boy thought about the lengths parents would go to for their children. Though he felt sorry for the centipede, he decided to help them, especially since they had treated him to meat. The boy began discussing the centipede, and the patriarch eagerly asked if he had seen one. He admitted he hadn't but suggested he might know where they could find it. Drawing on his vast knowledge as Spicy Fabre, a former biologist and streamer with expertise in venomous creatures, the boy recalled facts about centipedes. Among the millions of species on Earth, around 20,000 are venomous, and he knew all of them by heart. Centipedes were no exception. In his mind, he visualized opening a book and flipping through its pages, searching for the specific information he needed. Within moments, he closed the book, having found the answer. Back in reality, he told the elders he might know where the centipede could be. Startled but intrigued, they pressed him for details. The boy asked which areas they had already searched. They explained they had explored to the north and east of the academy, primarily along the riverside during the day. Hearing this, the boy wasn't surprised by their lack of success. Smirking, he remarked, "Of course you couldn't find it." The elders, puzzled, demanded an explanation. The boy began to lecture, explaining that centipedes belong to the Arthropoda phylum and the Calopoda class, preparing to share his knowledge of their habits and habitats. Centipedes have a broad range of habitats, and being cold-blooded, they require shelter to regulate their body temperature and maintain humidity levels. Interestingly, unlike most insects with a waterproof outer layer, centipedes have weak waterproofing and pores in their shells, making them averse to wet environments. They thrive in high-humidity areas but avoid waterlogged places, as they can't survive long without moisture but dislike excessively damp conditions. Because of this, the blue spot centipede is unlikely to be found in jungles or near rivers. The elders were skeptical. They believed centipedes preferred environments like cracks in rotting wood. The boy clarified that while smaller centipedes might dwell there, the larger ones they were seeking wouldn't. Big centipedes avoid jungles and riverside rocks since these areas lack sufficient hiding spots. The elders exchanged glances, silently communicating. They then asked the boy where the centipede might be found. Promising a significant reward if he helped, the boy smiled and pointed westward, suggesting they search the Rocky Mountains in that direction. He explained that large centipedes rest under warm rocks during the day and come out at night. A few hours later, the search party scoured the Rocky Mountains. The patriarch climbed a tall, narrow rock, observing the surroundings. One of the men suggested that the young warrior might have been mistaken. The patriarch decided to end the search for the day, signaling the team with an arrow. As the men gathered around a bonfire, they were visibly exhausted but still clung to hope, trusting the boy's intelligence. The patriarch, deep in thought, eventually spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. He lamented that his daughter, Huayun, was the greatest talent in the Tang family's history and questioned why the heavens seemed to abandon her. Suddenly, a voice announced the Grand Patriarch's return. The patriarch welcomed him and they gathered around the fire. The Grand Patriarch confirmed that he too had failed to find the centipede. With Huayun's condition worsening and only a few months left, he doubted they could locate the creature in 10 days. A heavy silence fell. The patriarch suggested exploring the southern region the next day. The Grand Patriarch agreed but added that they hadn't found any traces so far. Hearing this, the patriarch suddenly burst into laughter, realizing something he had overlooked. He exclaimed that they were indeed in the right place. The Grand Patriarch was puzzled and asked if he had seen anything. The Patriarch replied no, but the Grand Patriarch elaborated. He explained that the complete absence of traces, no animals, droppings or markings, was a sign that the centipede might have cleared the area. The realization struck the Patriarch. Territorial animals might have fled or fallen prey to the centipede. Confident, the Grand Patriarch assured him that the blue spot centipede was definitely nearby. Their hope to save Huayan reignited. Suddenly the ground beneath them began to shake. Cracks appeared and the bonfire area started to crumble. To their horror, a massive limb emerged from the earth, followed by another. The men froze in terror as the enormous blue spot centipede revealed itself. Even the Grand Patriarch looked unsettled. Back at the academy, the boy grumbled about the chaos. He wondered how massive the centipede must be to cause such a commotion. Being a venomous animal enthusiast, he was both annoyed and curious, wishing he could see the creature himself. At the Rocky Mountains, the battle against the centipede raged on. The men eventually triumphed, though not without sustaining injuries. They successfully retrieved the centipede's core, a shimmering blue gem safely stored in a wooden box. Overcome with emotion, they wept, knowing they could finally save Huayan. The Patriarch instructed the Grand Patriarch to lead the injured warriors to Sichuan for treatment. When asked why he wasn't coming, the Patriarch explained, "Grudges are carved in blood, but favors are carved in stone. That's the way we live." In summary, they still had matters to resolve. The Grand Patriarch finally understood and admitted how he had nearly made a grave mistake by focusing solely on Huayan. He agreed it would be appropriate to welcome the young warrior as a guest and grant his requests. The Patriarch instructed the injured warrior to receive treatment in the village while he went to visit the young warrior. He considered that the young warrior might also be curious about the recent events. Meanwhile, the young warrior was casually enjoying the company of 3 small yellow Pokemon-like creatures. The young warrior found himself in a peculiar situation. He had unexpectedly become the father to 3 blue spot centipedes. These tiny creatures, resembling caterpillars, were undeniably cute, especially as they affectionately rubbed against his face. Looking at the pot, a memory flashed in his mind. When he had brought the eggs home, he cleaned them and placed them on his nightstand. By the time he woke up, they had all hatched. 1 centipede happily rested on his head. Although the young warrior had anticipated the eggs might hatch, he hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. He tried to remove the centipedes clinging to his shoulders, but they refused to let go, treating him as their parent. A flashback revealed what had transpired the previous night. Driven by curiosity about the massive blue spot centipede, the young warrior had ventured into its lair, despite knowing the risks. During his search, he accidentally kicked an insect in frustration, causing him to lose his balance and drop his torch. Thankfully, the 3 eggs he had collected remained safe. Relieved that the rain had stopped, he realized how lucky he had been to retrieve the eggs without losing them. Determined to protect the eggs, he hurried back home, promising them a proper bath once he arrived. Back in the present, the young warrior felt satisfied that even though he couldn't see the live adult centipede, he had managed to save its offspring. He reminded himself that they wouldn't need food until after their second molting, but it was a challenge dealing with them constantly clinging to his body. Thinking of a solution, he smirked and decided to take a shower, hoping the water would make them leave him alone. Elsewhere, the elder patriarch arrived at the academy and approached the pavilion. Knocking on the door, he called out to the young warrior but received no response. After a brief hesitation, he turned the knob and entered the room. Inside, he noticed herbs, jars and medicines, which made him wonder if the young warrior was a healer. Feeling it was intrusive to enter uninvited, he decided to leave, but the rustling sound from a pot caught his attention. Curious, he opened the pot and found a spider inside. His gaze shifted to the drawers where he discovered a gecko. Checking another pot, he saw beetles, alongside eggs and dried snakes scattered around. The elder was astounded. He couldn't comprehend how the young warrior managed to raise such venomous creatures and their offspring. Even the Tang clan, well-versed in handling poisons, had only been able to extract venom, not cultivate eggs like this. The elder realized his encounter with the young warrior was the true stroke of luck, far beyond the centipede's discovery. As the young warrior appeared and greeted him, the elder noticed the boy's concern about his bandaged arm. Dismissing it as a minor injury, the elder began to share something important but was interrupted by a sudden ominous energy. An explosion rocked the entrance behind them, and a shadowy figure began to emerge. As its form became clear, it resembled an ogre with a single eye and burn scars on one side of its face. The elder immediately shoved the young warrior aside, urging him to flee. The young warrior was caught off guard and confused. The monster let out a deafening roar and moved with alarming speed, attacking with its hand. The elder blocked the strike with his uninjured arm, enduring immense pain. The monster retaliated, throwing the elder back and sending him crashing into the ground. The area filled with dust as the elder struggled to catch his breath, coughing up blood. He realized the monster's strength rivaled that of his own father. He desperately told the young warrior to escape, but when the dust cleared, the scene revealed the young warrior being held in the air, choking as the monster gripped him tightly. The young warrior gasped for air as the monster roared with laughter. The creature mocked him, claiming he had heard that members of the Tang clan had arrived in Hainan. It sneered, saying no one could have imagined that the son of the myriad poison's divine sovereign would end up wounded and alone. The elder calmly retorted that he had no idea who the monster was and demanded to know why both he and the young warrior were being targeted. The creature scoffed, asking if its disfigured face and powerful fists didn't make it obvious. It then introduced itself as Takenyang, the blood hand rakshasa, and blamed the elder's father for its mutilated appearance. The elder recognized the name. He recalled hearing that Takenyang had been struck by a poison palm and fallen off a cliff, presumed dead. Yet here he was, alive and seething with vengeance. The elder tried reasoning with him, pleading for the release of the young warrior and offering his own life in exchange. But Takenyang refused, vowing to annihilate anyone associated with the Tang clan. Inwardly, the elder cursed this relentless demon, a term used for martial artists who sow chaos and destruction. It was clear Takenyang had no intention of sparing the young warrior. As the warrior's face grew pale from suffocation, Takenyang sneered and prepared to end his life. Desperately, the young warrior begged for mercy, his strength waning with every passing second. Just then, 3 pairs of fierce eyes flashed. The tiny centipedes lunged onto Takenyang's arm. The once adorable creatures revealed their ferocity, biting into the monster's skin with unrelenting force. Takenyang was taken aback, shouting angrily that mere centipedes couldn't harm him. But as he spoke, his neck turned violet, and he coughed up blood before collapsing in agony. The young warrior, now free, stumbled backward, staring in disbelief. He cautiously asked the elder if Takenyang had been a bad person. The elder, equally stunned, watched as the lifeless body of Takenyang lay on the ground. Slowly, his shock turned into a wide grin as he realized the young warrior was far more extraordinary than a mere guest. The elder thought to himself that this boy must join the Tang clan. A few days later, the elder was recovering, and the young warrior diligently cared for him, placing a damp cloth on his forehead. The elder expressed his gratitude, but the young warrior suggested instead that he tell him the whereabouts of his companions so he could check on them. Realizing he couldn't leave the elder alone and that calling for a doctor wasn't an option, the warrior stayed. The elder reassured him, saying he would recover with rest, but the warrior remained skeptical, bewildered at how calm the elder could be after such severe injuries. When the elder explained that martial artists had extraordinary resilience, the young warrior was incredulous. He asked if martial artists could fly and shoot fireballs. The elder chuckled and admitted that while not everyone could, it wasn't entirely far-fetched. The young warrior marveled at the strangeness of this world, acknowledging that things like giant centipedes only made sense here. The elder formally introduced himself as Tang Kailson of the Sichuan Tang Clan, and the young warrior introduced himself as Wei Soryang. Kailson noted the meaning of Soryang's name, small dragon, and remarked that it was fitting. Curious, Kailson asked if the centipedes on Soryang's body were venomous. Soryang casually rubbed one of the centipedes' bellies and confirmed that they were blue spot centipedes. The revelation made Kailson leap from the bed in shock. He asked if Soryang had tamed them and how he had managed such a feat. Soryang smiled and replied that it was a long story. When Kailson insisted he didn't mind, Soryang began recounting how he had raised the centipedes from eggs. When the story concluded, Kailson could hardly believe it and asked for confirmation. Soryang proudly affirmed that he had indeed raised them from eggs, predicting their hatching with precision. Still reeling, Kailson watched as Soryang opened a drawer and pulled out 2 lizards. The young warrior eagerly displayed them, pointing out the differences. One had a brown body with yellow and white stripes, while the other, a product of selective breeding, had a plain brown body and a white tail. Kailson asked if Soryang had intentionally bred the lizards for their coloration. Blushing slightly, Soryang happily admitted that he had, simply because he found it beautiful. Kailson gathered his composure and asked if the young warrior could breed the most venomous creatures to produce even deadlier ones. Soryang responded with a surprised, "Huh? In his mind he considered the possibility, it was theoretically feasible. He then explained to Kaleson that if they could determine which creatures had the most potent venom, it might be possible. Before he could finish, Kaleson exclaimed with excitement, "Really? That's possible?" His enthusiasm startled Soryang. Without hesitation, Kaleson declared that Soryang should join his family immediately. This left Soryang completely bewildered. Kaleson sweetened the offer, promising that by joining the family, Soryang would gain access to their martial arts techniques, rare elixirs, herbs, and any poisons he desired. Kaleson further tempted him, saying someone of Soryang's skill could even capture or tame the legendary 10 great venomous creatures of the Central Plains. And if that wasn't enough, Kaleson casually mentioned one of the 3 flowers of the Central Plains, his daughter. Soryang shouted, "Hold on," and asked Kaleson to clarify what he had just said. Amused, Kaleson teased that while Soryang might be young, he was still a man. He continued talking about the flowers, but Soryang quickly interrupted, telling him to drop the subject. Shifting the topic, Soryang inquired about the 10 great venomous creatures, asking if they were as incredible as the blue spot centipede. Kaleson enthusiastically confirmed, explaining that while the blue spot centipede was remarkable, it ranked far below the legendary creatures. From giant scorpions to the golden frog that gleamed like gold, these creatures were beyond imagination. Kaleson grinned, sensing that he had piqued Soryang's interest. The young warrior's eyes sparkled with excitement. 2 days later, a member of the Tang clan arrived, alarmed by news of the blood hand rakshasa, Tak Anyang appearing. Kaleson explained that Anyang had been hiding and honing his martial arts, reaching a level close to his father's. The Tang clan members speculated that if the patriarch had sent Anyang to his demise, it might mean he had reached the realm of 10,000 poisons. They began congratulating him, but Kaleson clarified that he hadn't been the one to defeat Anyang, it was the young warrior. This revelation stunned the clan members. One of them immediately clasped Soryang's hands, expressing their gratitude for saving the patriarch. They even speculated if Soryang was an elder rejuvenated to a younger form. Soryang, confused by their assumptions, looked to the patriarch for clarification. Kaleson requested Soryang to reveal the truth. Understanding the signal, Soryang patted his chest and called out, "Come on out." The Tang clan members watched in amazement as Soryang's clothes rustled, and 3 tiny centipedes peeked out. Gasps of astonishment filled the room as the little creatures crawled forward. The clan members recognized them as blue spot centipedes, creatures known for their venom. Kaleson explained that these centipedes had been the ones to defeat Anyang. The clan marveled at the feat, as taming such creatures was unheard of. Kaleson then declared his decision to formally accept Soryang into the Tang clan, but Soryang hesitated, saying he needed more time to think. A clan member encouraged Soryang, emphasizing the great opportunity, while Kaleson urged him to prepare quickly, hinting at something important they couldn't delay. Kaleson then explained the sinister nature of Anyang's martial art, the blood hand poison claw, a dark technique requiring human blood and bone marrow to reach mastery. Soryang found it grotesque. Kaleson continued, stressing that if Anyang had left behind secret scrolls or disciples, they needed to eliminate them to prevent the resurgence of such dangerous martial arts. He also mentioned the possibility of rescuing any captives. The patriarch then asked if Soryang would assist, considering his familiarity with Hainan Island. Soryang appeared pensive, realizing that joining the Tang clan would be a lifelong commitment. He thought to himself that before committing, it was essential to observe the clan's dynamics, just like assessing a workplace during an internship. Soryang agreed to help once the patriarch recovered. They praised his decision, but Soryang privately resolved to use the opportunity to evaluate the Tang clan thoroughly. After 3 days, Kaleson was well enough to travel. Together, they journeyed to a village near an abandoned martial academy, suspected to be Anyang's base. There, they began investigating reports of missing villagers. An elderly man mentioned that 1 or 2 people typically go missing in the jungle each year, but there haven't been any patterns of regular disappearances. Kaleson fell silent, lost in thought. They thanked the village chief for sharing the information. The chief replied humbly, expressing his honor in assisting the renowned patriarch of the Sichuan Tang Clan. They then took their leave, though they hadn't uncovered any significant leads. As they made their way through the forest, Soryang remarked to Kaleson that there didn't seem to be anything unusual about the village. Kaleson explained that when Anyang had revealed himself, it had been in that area, but the exact location was difficult to pinpoint. Soryang found it equally strange that there were no traces left behind. Remembering Anyang's words, he suddenly had an idea. Soryang asked if Chilson recalled what Eunhyang had said when he appeared. Chilson admitted that he didn't, as he'd been knocked away by Eunhyang's attack at the time. Soryang reminded him that Eunhyang had claimed to have heard that the Tang clan had come to Hainan, implying someone had informed him of their presence. Soryang proposed they retrace their steps through the places the Tang clan had visited in Hainan and ask around with Eunhyang's portrait. The Tang clan members were taken aback by Soryang's quick thinking. It made sense that someone who had seen them would have tipped off Eunhyang. Energized by the idea, they set out immediately. Their journey brought them to a gloomy village. One Tang clan member reported hearing rumors at the Hainan port that this was the village they were looking for. Chilson confirmed it was a place where the Halai people lived, and he assumed they wouldn't be hostile. However, the village had an eerie, lifeless atmosphere. When the Tang clan called out, asking if anyone was around, a villager noticed them. The villagers appeared weak and sickly. An elderly man, possibly the village chief, approached while holding the hand of a frail little girl. Two guards accompanied them, also looking unwell. Chilson introduced himself politely, while Soryang observed the interaction. He noticed how weak the child looked and how lifeless the villagers seemed. Soryang began suspecting something unusual. Many villagers appeared to have taken some kind of medicine. The chief denied that anything was wrong, insisting there were no missing villagers or unusual events. He abruptly told them to leave. When Chilson tried to point out the disproportion between the number of houses and the few people present, the chief cut him off, repeating that there was nothing of interest and urging them to leave again. Both Chilson and Soryang were puzzled. Chilson whispered to Soryang, wondering why the Halai people who should have been welcoming were acting this way. Soryang had no answer. Just then the little girl collapsed. Everyone was startled. The chief quickly cradled her in his arms, tears brimming in his eyes. He called out to her, saying she was his only remaining family and begging her not to leave him. The scene moved Chilson, who stepped forward and offered his help, explaining that he had some knowledge of medical arts. The chief hesitated and then asked if it was Central Plains medical knowledge. Chilson confirmed that, while he wasn't a physician, he had some expertise in medicine. The chief finally allowed him to examine the child. Before they entered, the chief explained that a plague had been spreading in the village, killing children and weakening healthy adults. He begged Chilson to try to save his granddaughter. Chilson promised to do his best. As they were ushered inside, Soryang asked a Tang clan member if the elder truly knew medical arts. The member explained that the Tang clan's deep knowledge of poisons also made them skilled in medicine. He added that martial arts training often begins with an understanding of one's own body, which includes medical knowledge. Soryang thought to himself that if he joined the Tang clan, learning medical arts would be far preferable to mastering their terrifying poison techniques. However, his thoughts were interrupted when the man casually mentioned that they sometimes tested poisons on captured criminals to study the effects. Soryang's expression turned comical as he realized this meant human experimentation, making him increasingly uneasy. Meanwhile, the streets of the village were eerily quiet. Inside one of the homes, Chilson sighed and explained that he had transferred some of his ki to the girl, stabilizing her breathing. The chief was overwhelmed with gratitude and begged them to save his only granddaughter. Chilson brought up an important point, noting that something seemed strange about the child's pulse. He asked if she had been born with a weak heart. The village chief explained that her illness began about 6 months ago. Not only his granddaughter but others in the village also started falling ill around the same time. They referred to it as a mysterious disease. That was why he initially told them to leave when they arrived at the village's entrance. Chilson reassured the chief, saying he would provide good medicine for the heart. He asked the chief to gather the villagers so they could distribute the remedy. Overcome with emotion, the chief burst into tears, expressing his heartfelt gratitude. Soryang quietly observed Chilson's actions with admiration. Later that night, as Chilson walked with Gu Pai, a member of the Tang clan, Pai acknowledged the effort Chilson had put into treating the villagers. Chilson thanked him before Pai inquired about the symptoms. Chilson explained they were unusual: lethargy, swollen eyes, mild fever, irregular pulses, but the most severe cases all involved heart issues. Curious, Chilson asked about Soryang's whereabouts. Pai replied that Soryang, likely exhausted from helping despite having no martial arts training, had gone to bed. Chilson agreed that it was understandable and decided to check on him. Pai offered to lead the way. When they entered Soryang's room, they found him sleeping soundly on the bed, with 3 centipedes resting in a basket nearby. Chilson observed from the doorway before suddenly stepping inside. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and slapped Soryang. Soryang jolted awake, clutching his stinging cheek, confused and in pain. He demanded to know why Kaelson had hit him. Kaelson, with a serious expression, apologized and explained there had been a bug on Soryong's face, and he had only wanted to get rid of it. Soryong looked at him skeptically but allowed Kaelson to explain further. Kaelson said he had come to check on him before going to bed but noticed the bug. In this region, venomous insects were common, so he had acted quickly to prevent any danger. He showed Soryong the bug, a large, unsettling creature. Soryong was startled by the sight and then seemed to piece something together. He asked Kaelson if all the patients with different symptoms shared one common condition: arrhythmia. Kaelson confirmed this. Soryong suddenly realized the source of the village's mysterious illness and pointed at the bug, declaring it the culprit. He identified the insect as a kissing bug, a member of the Reduviidae family. These bugs feed on blood, often biting near the eyes or lips, and are so discreet they can draw blood more quietly than a mosquito. Known as vampire or assassin bugs, they aren't venomous but carry harmful parasites in their stomachs. When they bite, their excrement can transmit diseases like Chagas disease, a deadly illness that ranks high among animal-caused human fatalities. Soryong then asked the village chief if the village's dogs exhibited symptoms similar to those of the sick humans, such as shortness of breath. The chief confirmed they did and asked if the bug was to blame. Soryong affirmed this, adding that with proper medicine, his granddaughter and others could be saved. Kaelson grinned and asked Pai what he thought. Pai commented on Soryong's perceptiveness, praising him as a young warrior of great potential. Watching them, Soryong was baffled by their expressions and wondered what was going on. They reminded him that they were members of the Sichuan Tang Clan. When Soryong's puzzled face made it clear he didn't understand the significance, Kaelson repeated the statement. Internally Soryong thought, so what? His irritated and confused expression was unintentionally amusing. Kaelson began explaining the concept of goo. Some believed these were venomous parasites, while others thought of them as a form of witchcraft. According to him, malicious individuals in China bred these bugs to cause suffering or manipulate others. They would feed the bugs to people, causing either excruciating pain or complete subjugation. Soryong found the idea hard to believe. Kaelson acknowledged it sounded extraordinary but added that many martial artists had been killed by goo, forced to harm their families, or enslaved by these evil practitioners. Because of this, efforts to develop antidotes to goo had been relentless. These cures could either expel the parasites from the body or destroy them entirely. As Kaelson spoke, Soryong began to grasp the gravity of the situation. Kaelson posed a question. If someone had succeeded in creating a cure, who could it be? With pride, he declared that it could only be the renowned Sichuan Tang family. He explained that if they had something capable of dissolving a fist-sized roundworm inside a body, dealing with a tiny bug would be no trouble. Then he revealed the curse-melting orb, stating that even a small dose of this medicine would suffice. Soryong expressed mild amusement, though inwardly he reflected on how extravagant the name sounded for what was essentially an antiparasitic drug. They reassured the village chief that they could save his granddaughter, and soon enough the villagers began recovering, starting with her. The chief was deeply relieved, and the villagers' warm hospitality was an unexpected but welcome reward. The villagers, with their bright and cheerful demeanor, lived up to their reputation for optimism. Kaelson acknowledged that the situation would have been much harder without Soryong's insight in identifying the cause of the illness. He humbly redirected the villagers' gratitude to Soryong, praising him as their true savior. Despite the Tang family's medicine curing the villagers, Kaelson insisted on giving all the credit to Soryong. Watching the villagers thank Soryong brought Kaelson great satisfaction, as though he were the one being celebrated. Soryong was touched by this gesture. The villagers rejoiced, lifting Soryong and tossing him into the air repeatedly in celebration. Later, the village chief pulled Kaelson aside to revisit their earlier conversation at the village entrance. When Kaelson asked what it was about, the chief mentioned the villages where people had gone missing. Intrigued, Kaelson asked for more details. The chief explained that one of the women in their village, originally from another settlement, had shared a troubling story. Years ago, her hometown suffered a tragedy where several villagers mysteriously disappeared. They believed they had finally uncovered the truth. Kaelson inquired about the village's location, and the chief pointed them westward. Upon arrival, the stench of decay was overwhelming, confirming they were in the right place. The scene was grim, corpses, refuse and insects littered the area, with poison lingering in the air. Pai warned Soryong not to look, but Soryong had already seen it all. Amid the carnage, a man spotted something unusual, a golden chicken foot peeking out of a pile. On closer inspection, it was attached to a bird, a magnificent creature with a golden tail and feathers in shades of purple, pink and black. The bird radiated an almost magical aura. One of the men, angered by the bird's presence among the dead, hurled a rock at it despite Kaelson's attempt to stop him. The rock missed, but it caught the bird's attention. Kaelson, sensing danger, placed a calming hand on the man's shoulder, warning that something felt off. The bird spread its wings, releasing a toxic miasma that melted nearby skeletons. Startled, Soryong was grabbed by someone who covered his mouth to prevent him from inhaling the poison. Kaelson commanded everyone to flee while shielding Soryong. He explained that the creature was a Jinyao, a poison-feathered bird. Once safe, the group gathered around Kaelson, who described the bird in detail. Its wingspan reached 5 feet, its sharp beak gleamed bronze, and its body was cloaked in vibrant purple feathers. The creature could spread death with a single movement, turning everything around it to poison. Atop its head sat a golden crown, giving it an air of regal menace. Soryong, captivated, asked if it was one of the 10 great venomous creatures. Kaelson confirmed that it was and explained that the Jinyao held the top rank, earning the title of the king of all venom. Soryong's excitement was palpable as he imagined how even the most dangerous insects and snakes seemed tame in comparison. Kaelson explained that the Jinyao was likely drawn to the area by venomous snakes, as it only consumed the heads of such creatures. When Soryong asked how common they were, Kaelson replied that sightings were rare, perhaps once in a century. Fascinated, Soryong asked if it was possible to capture the creature. His question left the Tang members stunned. Kaelson, however, was amused and inquired if Soryong truly wanted to try catching it. When Soryong admitted he did but expressed concern about the venom, Kaelson smiled knowingly. He remarked on Soryong's keen interest in the 10 great venomous creatures and assured him that if he was serious, there was indeed a way. Soryong was astonished. Kaelson explained that if he mastered the Tang clan's poison techniques, he would gain immunity to all toxins and even withstand Jinyao's venom. Only through the martial arts of their clan could one nullify all poisons in the world. Kaelson, ever cunning, casually mentioned that their techniques are never taught to outsiders. Even if he wished to help as the patriarch, he couldn't break the clan's rules. Eagerly, Soryong asked if joining the family would grant him the right to learn. He also inquired whether achieving immunity to poison would truly let him endure Jinyao's venom. Kaelson confirmed and promised to teach him everything without reservation if Soryong agreed immediately. He also assured him that he would personally oversee his progress. However, Kaelson added that if Soryong hesitated too long, he might reconsider. Feeling the pressure, Soryong declared his decision to join the clan and expressed his anticipation for Kaelson's guidance, calling him patriarch instead of elder. Kaelson's mischievous grin betrayed his satisfaction, though he acted as if he hadn't coerced Soryong into agreeing. Kaelson told Soryong that from that moment onward, he would forever be part of their family. Back at a decayed location, traces of the blood hand rakshasa, Tak Anyang, were found in a cave. Footsteps led to a notebook discovered inside, which was brought to Kaelson. After scanning its contents, he confirmed it held the secret techniques of the blood hand poison claw. Soryong was unnerved, noting it was written in blood. Kaelson decided it was time to return. When Soryong asked if they were heading to Sichuan, Kaelson replied that it was the best course of action now that they had secured the blue spot centipede's core and the manual. Soryong requested a stop at the academy to release his friends and gather his belongings, which Kaelson approved. As they departed, Soryong glanced behind and noticed something unusual. Pointing it out, they discovered a shining purple feather from the Jinyao. They all stared at it thoughtfully. Kaelson picked it up and told Soryong it would serve as a keepsake to commemorate his joining the family. Soryong expressed interest and thanked him, but Kaelson corrected him, suggesting he change how he addressed him after the upcoming ceremony. Soryong wondered if it would be some kind of initiation ritual. Meanwhile, at the Tang clan, the Grand Patriarch Tang Musong had finally returned. Exhausted, he wasted no time and inquired about Huayun's condition. Clan members rushed him inside, reporting that she was barely holding on to life. The door opened and Musong immediately called for Huayun. Those inside were surprised by his arrival. He informed his daughter-in-law that he had succeeded in acquiring the medicine and revealed the blue spot centipede's core. Overcome with relief, the daughter-in-law began to cry. Preparations were made to administer the medicine. Musong was deeply moved by Huayun's pained expression, thankful he had hurried back in time. At his daughter-in-law's urging, Musong gave the medicine to his granddaughter. A radiant blue light enveloped her as he placed a finger on her wrist to check her pulse. Everyone anxiously hoped for her to open her eyes, watching and waiting. Meanwhile, Soryang felt groggy, marveling at the vastness of the Central Plains, which far exceeded his expectations. The journey had taken over a month and a half, beginning with a boat ride from Hainan to Hangzhou and continuing through Nanjing before finally arriving in Sichuan. At the residence of the Sichuan Tang Clan, Pai excitedly announced their destination to Soryang. Standing at the grand entrance, Soryang gaped as he learned the entire mountain belonged to the Tang Clan, aptly named Tang Clan Mountain. He swallowed nervously, overwhelmed by the sight. Immediately, members of the Tang Clan emerged to greet the patriarch. Soryang was astonished by their sheer numbers, wondering if all of them belonged to the Sichuan Tang Clan. Among the crowd, a girl in a red dress ran toward them, her face lit with tears of joy as she called out for her father. It was Huayan. She embraced her father tightly, crying tears of relief. Soryang meanwhile was spellbound. Her radiant beauty left him speechless, surpassing even the celebrity he had once been involved with in his past life. Chilson, pleased to see his daughter alive, introduced Huayan to Soryang. Dazed, Soryang struggled to piece together Chilson's earlier comments, muttering something about weeds or grass before Chilson corrected him. It was all about the flower. Huayan's cheeks flushed red. Chilson told Soryang that the girl beside him was the flower he had previously dismissed. Soryang was left dumbfounded. He recalled their earlier conversation about the flower and felt a wave of embarrassment. In that moment he knew he had made a grave mistake. He never imagined he had overlooked the chance of being with such a beautiful woman, the only daughter of the Sichuan Tang Clan, famously known as the venomous flower Tang Huayan. Since childhood, Huayan carried a hidden emotional weight. She once overheard elders discussing her. While they were uncertain of her talent, they agreed her beauty was exceptional, enough to rank her among the 3 flowers of the Murim. The conversation shifted to finding her a suitable husband. One elder mentioned suggesting the patriarch take a second wife, but the patriarch had declined, leaving him baffled. Hearing this, Huayan resolved to prove herself to the clan by excelling in their martial arts. She wanted to show that even as a woman she could contribute greatly to the family. However, her impatience led her astray, creating an internal heart demon that caused a key deviation in her training. When Huayan awoke, her mother, the Grand Patriarch, and 2 others surrounded her bed. Her mother looked visibly relieved. Tears streamed from Huayan's eyes as she apologized, lamenting that she had failed her family and lost all her inner chi. Her grandfather, the Grand Patriarch, called her a brat and told her to stop crying. He reminded her how far she had come to reach the level of mastering 100 poisons and told her to cheer up. Huayan's confusion grew when he mentioned 100 poisons. She noticed her aura glowing and asked for clarification. The Grand Patriarch revealed a story about a mysterious young warrior who had not only saved her life but also endowed her with the inner chi of 1,000 poisons, far surpassing what she had previously achieved. In the present, Huayan asked about weed, leaving Soryang utterly embarrassed. His earlier flippant remark comparing her to weeds resurfaced in his mind. He berated his past self for such thoughtlessness but tried to dismiss the moment by joking that the patriarch had taken the comment too seriously. Gathering himself, he greeted Huayan formally, stating how glad he was to see her healthy. Huayan introduced herself as Tang Huayan, also known as the venomous flower. She expressed her gratitude, promising never to forget the life-saving favor he had done for her. Soryang, entranced by her beauty, struggled to form coherent thoughts. Kilson interrupted, asking Soryang what he thought of his daughter. To Soryang's shock, he heard a voice in his head, realizing it was some form of sound transmission. Kilson teased, asking if Soryang agreed that Huayan was stunning and hinted at the possibility of them growing closer. Later, Soryang rested in a large bath, feeling utterly drained. Nearby, the centipedes he had cared for were sleeping peacefully in a basket. He noticed one waking up and, surprisingly, smiling at him. Despite their intimidating appearance, they seemed to understand his words when he warned them about the hot water, willingly staying in the bucket as he suggested. Amused by their behavior, Soryang recalled Pai's mention that centipedes were spiritual creatures. He made a mental note to learn more about them later. However, Kilson's earlier remarks about Huayan lingered in his mind, leaving him restless. At another pavilion, the family gathered around a large table. The Grand Patriarch, the Patriarch, his wife, and Huayan. Kilson announced his decision to give Soryang the East Wing Room, a space traditionally reserved for couples in Chinese residences. The Grand Patriarch questioned if Soryang was truly that talented. Kilson confirmed, explaining that Soryang's remarkable abilities went far beyond mere chance encounters. He elaborated that Soryang not only possessed unparalleled knowledge of venomous creatures but also defeated Ouyang, encountered legendary spiritual creatures, and even hatched the blue spot centipede eggs himself. The Grand Patriarch commented on the Patriarch's luck in finding such a treasure. The conversation then turned to Huayan. Kaleson told his daughter that he wished to make Soryang his son-in-law, asking for her opinion. As Huayan processed her father's words, realization dawned on her. She grew quiet. Huayan wanted to prove that she could bring greater value to the clan now that she possessed the 1,000 poisons constitution, surpassing the mere 100 poisons constitution. She responded that as a member of the Tang clan, she understood her father's intentions. However, she declared that it was her responsibility to determine if the young warrior was truly deserving of her. Without waiting for a reply, she dashed out of the room, leaving behind an awkward atmosphere. In Kaleson's mind, he thought the young warrior ought to be cautious. Though his rose was stunningly beautiful, her thorns were equally sharp. Huayan ran swiftly, her emotions in turmoil. Now that she had achieved the 1,000 poisons constitution, she was determined not to stop there. She knew that unless she pushed further, the elders would never fully recognize her. She resolved to evaluate the young warrior thoroughly from his abilities to his character. Meanwhile, Soryang was lost in thought, contemplating how to navigate the situation. He suspected Huayan might harbor resentment toward him. Half-jokingly he asked his centipedes, his kids, for advice. Suddenly Huayan appeared before him, stunning him completely. She was breathtaking. Side note: the art style here is so vivid it feels like a scene straight out of a classic manhwa. Back to the moment, Huayan quickly excused herself, saying she was in a hurry, and asked for his hand. Soryang extended his hand hesitantly, blushing as he did so, feeling like a loyal pet offering a paw. Trying to lighten the tension, he suggested that they should only do such things after getting closer, as there's a proper order to such matters. Huayan froze for a moment before understanding his misunderstanding. Her face turned beet red as she corrected him, insisting that wasn't her intention at all. Realizing his mistake, Soryang felt a wave of embarrassment. Huayan sighed and clarified again, explaining that she had only wanted to check his pulse. She apologized for startling him by suddenly asking for his hand. Sitting beside him, she admitted that her approach had been abrupt and assured him that she only wanted to explain some things. Soryang listened attentively. Huayan began recounting her struggles, sharing how, as the Tang clan's sole direct descendant, she constantly faced schemes from the branch families. To secure the family's future, the elders had decided to seek a capable son-in-law. They even considered how Soryang's role within the family might change should he join. She apologized in advance for needing to confirm something but assured him that no matter the outcome, she would treat him with respect as her benefactor, potentially even as a sworn sibling. Soryang reassured her, offering his hand again and saying she was free to confirm whatever she needed. Huayan placed her hand on his wrist, emitting a faint blue aura as she assessed his pulse. She explained that the Tang clan's martial arts were unique. They required practitioners to adapt to toxins gradually as their internal energy grew. The poisons were ranked: 5 poisons, 10 poisons, 100 poisons, 1,000 poisons, and finally 10,000 poisons. To her surprise, Soryang's body could adapt to 10 poisons, a rare feat for someone not born into the Tang clan. However, it was only 10 poisons, which meant his aptitude would place him at the level of a first-rate martial artist but no higher. She explained that this was the pinnacle someone without innate talent could reach. She then took her leave, leaving Soryang deep in thought. Alone, Soryang mulled over the revelation. A 10-poison body? His face paled at the implications. It might mean he couldn't capture the Jinyao, a crucial goal for him. Hours later, Huayan stepped out of her bath. Despite washing multiple times a day, she noticed her body emitted a strange scent ever since she had absorbed the blue spot centipede's inner core. Dressing herself, she wondered if it was some sort of punishment for her ungrateful words toward her savior. Meanwhile, Soryang was fast asleep, dreaming of a conversation with someone who thanked him for his kindness. It was Huayan, or so it seemed. When he asked if it was a dream, the figure explained that while it felt dreamlike, it was not. The entity revealed herself as the blue spot centipede, borrowing Huayan's appearance to avoid startling him. She introduced herself as the mother of all the creatures Soryang had encountered. Just then, 3 small girls appeared, and Soryang deduced that they were the centipede's offspring. He asked her how she managed to appear in his dreams. She explained that after being mercilessly killed, leaving her children behind, her lingering grudge reached the heavens, and her spirit became trapped in her inner core. She added that while she had been cursing the girl who consumed her core, An opportunity to resolve her grudge arose, allowing her to manifest in his dreams. This was possible because he had taken all her children with him. Soryang silently acknowledged his role in revealing her location, which indirectly led to her demise. Though unintentional, he still felt responsible for the death of the blue spot centipede. Watching her, he listened as she asked if her benefactor could grant her one request. Without hesitation, he promised to fulfill whatever she wished. Her request was simple. She asked him to care for her children until they were fully grown. Soryang was puzzled, noting that centipedes typically become independent after molting twice. She clarified that while this was true for ordinary centipedes, her species was unique. Until her offspring molted twice, they required the flow of qi from their mother's inner core to survive. Only afterward could they sustain themselves by feeding on the qi of other beings. This revelation led Soryang to ask whether the children needed to remain with Huayan, as she had consumed the inner core. The mother centipede explained the circumstances. She admitted that, in her anger, she had cursed Huayan, causing her body to emit a foul odor. The curse ensured no man would approach her, preventing her from ever having children. However, she was willing to lift the curse if her children were allowed to absorb the qi from Huayan's inner core. Perhaps in this way, Soryang could even win the girl's heart. Soryang considered her words carefully before smiling and responding that it didn't feel right. He couldn't take advantage of Huayan's predicament. The mother centipede admired his integrity and asked how he planned to handle the situation. She reminded him that Huayan sought strength in a man, and she couldn't magically procure the inner cores of the 10 great venomous creatures to aid him. This sparked an idea in Soryang. He asked her to trust him, assuring her that everything would work out. The next day, Soryang and Huayan sat side by side. Huayan now understood that the strange smell emanating from her body was due to the blue spot centipede's inner core. Soryang explained that by attaching the centipedes to her body every few days and letting them absorb the qi, the odor would naturally fade away. Huayan hesitated before asking if he was truly okay with helping her without asking for anything in return. She knew he could easily demand compensation for his assistance. Soryang smiled and told her he couldn't bring himself to exploit a woman's difficult situation, refusing to act shamelessly. Huayan was surprised by his response and felt guilty. She told him she couldn't continue accepting his kindness without offering something in return. Her father's words began to weigh more heavily on her. Seeing Soryang's selflessness made her realize that qualities beyond talent or martial prowess were important. Soryang then shared his own thoughts. Referring to her earlier remark about his 10-poison body, he revealed an ambitious plan. Since he could only absorb 10 types of toxins, he resolved to fill those slots with the toxins of the 10 most venomous creatures in the Central Plains. Huayan was shocked, interpreting his words as a bold declaration to become the strongest under the heavens, all for her sake. The thought made her cheeks flush. For Tang Huayan, one of the 3 flowers of Murim and the venomous flower of the Tang Clan, this was the first time a man had made such an audacious confession to her. Blushing, she asked if he realized what he had just said. Soryang, confused, replied that he didn't. Huayan told him the path he spoke of would be incredibly difficult and demanding, potentially requiring 10, 20, or even a lifetime of effort. Soryang's face fell as he worried aloud about how long it might take, amusing Huayan as she continued to blush. Then, with growing embarrassment, Huayan brought up that Soryang was only 15 years old. She told him that in 3 years, when he came of age and was ready for marriage, if he succeeded in defeating even one of the 10 great venomous creatures by then, she would consider it. Blushing deeply, she admitted that if he succeeded, there might even be a possibility of a wedding. She cheered loudly, saying she would be rooting for him, then bolted away. Soryang was confused and called out to her. She stopped, turned around, and asked if there was anything else he wanted to say. He suggested that she get some rest and stay for a couple of hours. Embarrassed, she hesitated but eventually returned. He reassured her there was no need to worry since the little centipedes wouldn't bite. Gathering his kids, he told them to go to their mom instead of their dad. Hearing this made Huayan's face flush as red as a tomato. She asked him what he meant by calling them mom and dad, but Soryang quickly clarified that it wasn't what she thought. Meanwhile, Chilson, his wife, and Muziang were seated at the table discussing the young warrior's exceptional talent and how it seemed to have failed to win their daughter's heart. Muziang asked if anyone had seen them earlier that morning. He remarked that it seemed like something was developing between the two. Huayan's mother speculated that her daughter might have rejected the young warrior. The men pondered deeply. Muziang commented that forcing a marriage wouldn't be right and suggested allowing their feelings to grow naturally. Huayan's mother proposed having Huayan oversee the young warriors' martial arts training to spend more time together, believing it could help them bond. Chilson agreed it was a solid plan. Muziang added that they could consult the elder healer sage to see if he could bestow the purifying elixir of marrow and essence to enhance the young warrior's aptitude. Chilson was surprised, noting that such an opportunity hadn't even been extended to Huayan, so they shouldn't get their hopes up. Muziang acknowledged the point. At that moment, Huayan appeared outside the door announcing herself. Chilson invited her in and asked what brought her there at that hour. She blushed, surprised to see the three of them together. She said she had something to share, blushed again and then all at once, declared she would do as her father had suggested. Chilson was taken aback and asked what she meant. Her mother invited her to sit and asked if she was implying that the young warrior had caught her interest. Embarrassed, Huayan couldn't respond. Chilson pressed her further, curious about the sudden change since she had previously shown little interest in him. Gathering her courage, Huayan explained that Soryang had told her he would become the greatest in the world for her. He had promised. Chilson, astonished, asked her to elaborate. She added that although Soryang's innate talent was limited to a 10-poison body, he vowed to make up for it by defeating the 10 great venomous creatures for her sake. Muziang laughed heartily, calling the young man bold. Chilson was stunned, while Huayan's mother was impressed, remarking that it was rare to find such a determined suitor. Huayan admitted that although her heart was inclined, she had told Soryang she would only agree to marriage if he could capture one of the 10 great venomous creatures before coming of age. Her father joked that she should have raised the bar to 3 creatures, while her mother commented that men often miss subtle hints. Huayan asked if she should go explain it to him. Her mother advised against it, reasoning that if Soryang didn't realize their tacit approval, he would only work harder. Muziang suggested treating him as a prospective son-in-law while pretending they were undecided, confident that his efforts would naturally lead him to become part of the family. Meanwhile, the mother centipede praised Soryang, telling him he had completely won Huayan's heart. Soryang replied that success came down to determination and persistence. She smiled warmly at him, calling him her benefactor. She then informed him that her lingering resentment had been resolved and her soul would soon ascend to the afterlife. Before departing, she offered to grant him one last request, within her ability to fulfill. Soryang paused to think and then asked if he could examine her body. The request made her feel shy, though she believed it was to be expected from a man. She assumed he was succumbing to human desires and reluctantly began revealing her shoulder, preparing to undress. Startled, Soryang quickly asked if she really needed to take her clothes off. Blushing deeply, she hesitated and asked if she shouldn't. Soryang hastily clarified that it wasn't what he had meant, further deepening her embarrassment. It was amusing to see the children covering their eyes. Soryang clarified that he only wanted to see the true appearance of a blue spot centipede. Realizing his intention, the centipede's mother hesitated, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation. Smoke enveloped the area, and she revealed her true form. Soryang gasped, overwhelmed by her magnificent and enormous appearance. His excitement was palpable. Without waiting for permission, he reached out to touch her, marveling at her size and asking endless questions. Was her body waterproof? How strong was her venom? Could he touch her legs, her antennae, even her fangs? The sheer enthusiasm in his voice was undeniable. The children continued covering their eyes, which only added to the charm of the moment. The centipede mother was slightly embarrassed by his passionate curiosity, particularly when he insisted on touching her fangs despite her warnings of their danger. She began to wonder if her daughters would truly be safe with a man like Soryang, whose touch carried an unusual energy. She couldn't help but laugh, finding it odd yet endearing how he drooled slightly while running his hands over her. Later, Chilson invited Soryang for tea. Chilson revealed that he'd learned everything from Huayan and declared that Soryang would be accepted as their son-in-law. Surprised, Soryang tried to clarify that he thought the arrangement was conditional and would require 3 years to finalize. Chilson dismissed his concerns, stating the marriage would naturally happen when he came of age. Huayan's mother warmly welcomed Soryang into the family, referring to him as her son-in-law. Mu Seong expressed his satisfaction, noting that Huayan had found an exceptional partner and that their clan would thrive even more. Soryang glanced at Huayan, perplexed by how quickly things had progressed. Despite his confusion, he decided to play along and replied politely that he looked forward to their guidance. When Mu Seong suggested getting started immediately, Soryang grew curious. Chilson explained that before Soryang could learn the Tang clan's poison arts, he must first experience the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. With a sly grin, Chelson assured him it was something he would undoubtedly appreciate. The family led Soryang to the hall, a place of great significance to the Tang clan. Soryang, excited by the prospect, assumed it was a treasure trove of poisons. However, as they walked, his attention drifted to Weian's side profile. He couldn't help but admire her beauty, likening the moment to a living portrait. His obvious admiration didn't go unnoticed by his in-laws, who exchanged amused glances. Chelson teased him, joking that if Soryang kept staring at his daughter like that, he might wear out her face. He reminded him that Weian was his woman now, yet Soryang gazed at her as though she were still untouchable. Weian's mother chimed in, noting that Soryang seemed utterly captivated by her. Both Weian and Soryang turned crimson with embarrassment. As they approached the hall, 3 men stood before a massive iron door. 2 muscular guards flanked a Tang clan official, who welcomed the Grand Patriarch and his grandson-in-law. At Musian's command, the gates were opened. The guards strained against the weight of the colossal doors, forged from rare Kunyu steel sourced from the southern wilderness. As the doors creaked open, Soryang observed the immense effort required. Though the gates finally yielded, the guards were visibly drained. Amused by their struggle, Soryang couldn't help but think how over-the-top the security was for something reminiscent of the Middle Ages. Chelson, noticing Soryang's concern, explained that the Kunyu steel was renowned for its unmatched durability. The Hall of 10,000 Poisons lay before them, and Soryang braced himself for what awaited inside. Even opening the gate was considered a privilege. Once inside, they arrived at the treasure vault where the Tang clan of Sichuan safeguarded its vast collection of poisons. This remarkable repository, known as the Hall of 10,000 Poisons, housed an incredible variety of toxins. Musian cautioned Soryang to be careful and avoid touching anything recklessly. Soryang nodded, affirming his understanding, but he couldn't help confirming whether the hall truly contained 10,000 poisons. Chelson chuckled, explaining that the poisons were meticulously classified into categories like paralysis poisons, sleep poisons and countless others. The elders, always playful, decided to tease the young pair. Chelson suggested that Weian explain the poisons to Soryang, knowing he would enjoy learning from her. The suggestion made both Weian and Soryang blush with embarrassment. Despite her awkwardness, Weian accepted the task. Taking Soryang by the hand, she guided him to see the Tang clan's most potent poison. Weian's discomfort was evident, while the elders watched the two with amused expressions. She began her explanation by pointing out the chi-dissipating poison, which rendered a martial artist's energy unusable with just a single inhalation. She advised Soryang to handle it with extreme care. She then introduced other deadly poisons: the alimentary canal necrotizing poison, the spirit-destroying poison, the bloody pulp poison, and even the infamous 7-step soul-snatching poison. Each was immensely powerful, but Weian emphasized that the strongest poison of the Tang clan was something far beyond these. She handed Soryang a tiny seed. Confused, he noted to himself that it resembled a tiger bean. Weian explained that this seed, though small, contained the most powerful poison known, apart from the venoms of the 10 great venomous creatures. She revealed it as the seed of the castor plant, a symbol of the Tang clan. Soryang immediately recognized its significance. He thought of ricin, a deadly toxalbumin, lethal in minuscule amounts, infamous for its use during the Cold War and assassinations. Soryang muttered that the seed came closest to the Tang clan's ideal of a perfect poison: colorless, odorless, tasteless, and invisible. Weian elaborated, calling it golden poison. When used, its victims experienced what the Tang clan referred to as a golden death. She emphasized that the strongest poison wasn't about causing the most excruciating pain or the bloodiest death. It was about silent, swift, and untraceable lethality. The Tang clan's poison arts, she explained, embodied the principles of stealth and certainty. To Soryang, it felt like he was learning the methods of an assassin's guild. Muxiang interrupted, saying it was enough for now and suggested they move on to see the venomous creatures Soryang had been so eager to encounter. He even offered Soryang the chance to oversee their care, with full support from the clan. In Soryang's mind, this translated to the clan indulging his passion as a hobby. His excitement was obvious. Before they could proceed, a messenger named Pai arrived, panting heavily. He urgently informed the Patriarch of a situation at the Black Tortoise Pavilion. The Patriarch asked what had happened, and Pai hesitated before mentioning 2 issues. First, the medicine sent to the Sichuan city lord had failed to achieve the desired effect, prompting a letter of complaints. Pai hesitated again before revealing the second issue, glancing at Soryang. Soryang sighed knowingly. Pai finally explained that it concerned the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. Muxiang guessed that rumors were already spreading and decided they needed to address the matter immediately. He ordered Soryang to accompany them. At the Black Tortoise Pavilion, the elders wasted no time voicing their grievances to the patriarch. They were outraged by his unilateral decision to pair Wuyun with an orphan of unknown origins. This remark infuriated Chiu-san, who began to emit a green aura as he questioned whether they were insulting his son-in-law. Despite Chiu-san's anger, the elders persisted, claiming their concerns were valid. Muxiang silenced them with a sharp rebuke, declaring that the decision was his alone. He demanded to know if they had any objections to his authority. The elders, caught off guard by his outburst, sought support from the Grand Patriarch, urging him to intervene. They argued that entrusting the Hall of 10,000 Poisons to an outsider with unproven skills was reckless. Muxiang, however, firmly reiterated that his approval was final. Meanwhile, Wuyun, conscious of Soryang's discomfort, quietly whispered an apology to him. In Soryang's mind, his initial reaction was simply goodness. He sighed as it dawned on him that his actions had caused her to worry. He thought to himself that it was she who should be apologizing. Everyone was taken aback when Soryang suddenly spoke up. "Excuse me," he said, "sorry to interrupt your discussion." He then proposed addressing the issue himself, stating that since the problem stemmed from his perceived lack of ability, he would prove his skills to the clan elders. The elders were stunned into silence, and Soryang went on to suggest resolving the Sichuan city lord's troublesome complaint as a demonstration of his capabilities. Wuyun, whispering in disbelief, asked what he was trying to achieve. Though Soryang was not one to draw attention or make a scene, he couldn't stand by while his peaceful life as a pet owner was being disrupted. His boldness left the elders momentarily speechless before their indignation erupted. They scolded him for interrupting the elders' discussion and demanded if he even knew the contents of the Sichuan city lord's letter before barging in. Calling him insolent and irrelevant, they complained to the patriarch about his interference. The elders seized the opportunity to argue for a son-in-law from a reputable martial family instead. Chao Sen's wife, however, was visibly annoyed by their tirade. Meanwhile, Soryang internally remarked on how absurd these old codgers sounded the longer they spoke. Recalling his days as Spicy Fabre, a streamer with over 1 million subscribers and thousands of viewers per session, he likened the elders' complaints to the nonsensical trolling he used to deal with. Addressing the group, Soryang pointed out that they still refused to acknowledge him as the Sichuan Tang Clan's son-in-law, meaning he was merely a guest. With his streaming experience, Soryang was well versed in handling chaos. He reminded them that he had saved the clan's beloved Lady Huayun, defeated the bloodhand rakshasa Takanyang, and saved the patriarch's life. He then challenged them, asking if it was part of the clan's etiquette to insult a guest and benefactor to their face. The elders, embarrassed by his pointed remarks, admitted to speaking rashly out of desperation. Inwardly, Soryang thought of them as pathetic. The Grand Patriarch, however, appeared impressed by his composure and cleverness. One elder tried to downplay the significance of defeating Takanyang, claiming it was overstated. The Patriarch quickly silenced the objection by presenting a document, none other than the secret manual of the blood sect's blood-hand poison arts, written in blood. The elders gasped in shock. Their astonishment deepened when the Patriarch asked Soryang to reveal his companions. Tapping his chest gently, Soryang summoned the 3 baby spotted centipedes, which emerged happily. The elders grew visibly uneasy at the sight of the creatures. The Patriarch proudly explained that these were the offspring of the blue-spotted centipede, and Soryang had been raising them. He further revealed that these centipedes were the ones that had killed Takanyang. One elder, still in disbelief, confirmed if Soryang had truly managed to control a blue-spotted centipede. Soryang and the Patriarch shared knowing grins, teasing the elders. Chao San added that addressing Soryang as a young warrior instead of recognizing him as the clan's son-in-law was telling. Soryang even joked, warning the centipedes not to bite anyone unless they wanted to end up as lifeless as Takanyang. The elders, thoroughly flustered, began backtracking. They denied refusing to accept Soryang, offering feeble excuses about proper procedures and natural hesitations. The Grand Patriarch, exasperated, decided to table the discussion on Soryang's status for the moment and focused on the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. He asked why Soryang was not allowed entry, to which the elders replied that Soryang was not fully integrated into the family and was too young to be entrusted with such responsibility. The Grand Patriarch, seeing an easy solution, asked Soryang to demonstrate his abilities. Soryong smiled confidently and declared that he would prove himself worthy of the Sichuan Tang Clan in their own style, by using poison. The elders were aghast, misinterpreting his words. They shouted in disbelief, asking if he intended to poison the Sichuan city lord instead of helping him. Soryong was left utterly confused by their reaction. Deep down, Soryong was puzzled as he believed that the Sichuan Tang Clan addressed poison-related matters the following day. The Grand Patriarch announced that Soryong would now begin training in the Tang Clan's martial art, the 5 Venoms returning technique. Soryong asked if the training would also involve physical exercises. The Grand Patriarch explained that as Soryong practiced martial arts, his body would naturally adapt to align with the techniques. Mu Soryong further clarified that the Tang Clan focused on practicality, so Soryong would learn skills that could be immediately applied in real situations. Mu Soryong unpacked an array of weapons, arrows, daggers, shuriken and more. They started with concealed throwable weapons such as needles, coins, darts, powders, daggers and throwing knives. Mu Soryong explained that while there were many unconventional concealed weapons, they could mostly be divided into 5 types. He asked Soryong which one he thought was the easiest to handle. Soryong guessed it was the dagger or throwing knife, which turned out to be correct. Then Mu Soryong inquired about the most difficult weapon. Soryong suggested powder, as it needed to be scattered effectively. However, Mu Soryong informed him that the needle was the most challenging. Surprised, Soryong assumed it was because the needle was small and thin, making it tricky to throw. Mu Soryong explained further, it wasn't just about the difficulty of throwing. Soryong would also need to remember exactly where he threw each needle. To demonstrate, Mu Soryong separated the head of a brush from its handle and made a quick motion. Suddenly, the brush's bristles floated in the air and transformed into needles, raining down and embedding themselves into the ground. Soryong was stunned by how the bristles acted like actual needles. Mu Soryong revealed this was part of the Tang Clan's hidden weapon technique called sky-obscuring flower rain, a secret art where hundreds or thousands of needles fall like flower petals, covering an area. In Soryong's mind, it seemed like the technique involved scattering needles everywhere and then fighting on the same turf. He expressed concern that with an area filled with such needles, there would hardly be any space to move. Mu Soryong laughed and confirmed his assumption, adding that Soryong would have to remember the needles' positions to avoid falling victim to his own technique. To Soryong this seemed almost unbelievable. He broke into a sweat as he confirmed with Mu Soryong that he would need to remember the positions of needles that deflected opponents as well as those that missed their mark. Mu Soryong affirmed this, informing him that with the 5 Venoms body, he'd need to memorize at least 100 positions just to begin. Soryong turned pale at the thought. Afterward, Soryong collapsed face first onto the ground. Lady Huayan arrived, wearing a beekeeping suit, and asked if she looked ready. She explained that she had heard he was planning to catch a hornet and wondered if the suit was unnecessary. Soryong assured her it wasn't, her suit would allow them to catch one themselves instead of waiting for it to come. Huayan asked if he knew where the hornet's nest was, and he replied that she'd understand once they arrived. Huayan informed him she had spotted a nest nearby, so they headed out together. As they walked, Huayan brought up the letter sent to the Sichuan city lord and asked if Soryong had read it. Soryong confirmed he had. Blushing, Huayan expressed concern that he might not fully understand the letter's contents due to his young age. Soryong responded confidently, remarking that yang qi, a man's vital energy, was indeed important. Embarrassed, Huayan quickly told him that was enough, but it was clear he already understood. The great issue troubling the Sichuan city lord, as Soryong revealed, was erectile dysfunction. His rod was no longer functioning. Huayan grew suspicious of Soryong's knowledge on the subject, given his age. Soryong brushed it off, explaining he had lived alone for some time. Embarrassed, Huayan quickened her pace. A few hours later they arrived at the forest. Soryong became distracted by the creatures there, and Huayan had to keep him focused until they reached their destination. The nest was located inside a small cave-like hollow, which seemed like an ideal spot for hornets. As they approached, Huayan asked what it meant to find a hive without bees. They put on their headgear as Soryong explained that while they were looking for hornets, they wouldn't be capturing any bees. Huayan was confused but followed his lead. They reached the hole, and Soryong explained that the venomous insect they sought was more likely to be found in smaller, weaker hives. Huayan hadn't known this but was relieved to see that the hive seemed to contain what they needed. An insect emerged from the hive, and with a swift movement, Soryong caught it using chopsticks. They hadn't come there to catch a hornet. The insect they were after was something else entirely. That tiny creature would solve the Sichuan city lord's problems. Huayan asked about the bug, wondering if it was a ground beetle. She guessed correctly. Soryong realized that in this world, the insect was indeed called a ground beetle. In the Central Plains, the bug found in the giant hornet's nest was known as a ground beetle, though in the modern world, it's referred to as a blister beetle. Huayan asked if it was normal for ground beetles to be found in a hornet nest. Soryong explained that their life cycle was quite unique. Blister beetles have an unusual method of reproduction. Unlike most insects that either guard their eggs or create a safe space for them to hatch, this little creature simply lays its eggs wherever it pleases. Soryong joked about how the blister beetle would tell its boss to hold on while it dropped some eggs before leaving, with no particular care about the location. It would just lay them anywhere, with the only consideration being to pile them in one spot. When the blister beetle larvae hatch, they start crawling toward the highest point nearby. Once they reach the top, they engage in an odd behavior. They cluster together and mimic a flower. This false flower then attracts bees, which mistake it for the real thing. When the bees approach, the larvae swarm onto a carpenter bee's body, taking over its home in an instant. Soryong wasn't sure why the larvae favored giant hornet nests, but it seemed to be the ideal environment for their growth. Huayan felt sorry for the giant hornets, but Soryong shrugged, saying there was nothing that could be done. Huayan knew that the bug caused burns on the skin and had heard that eating too much of it could even be deadly. Soryong confirmed this, explaining that the orange liquid released by a blister beetle contains cantharidin, a toxic substance that causes burns and blisters when it touches the skin. Huayan blushed and asked if it truly had such an effect. Soryong affirmed, adding that it also had the curious property of immediately raising a man's rod. Embarrassed, Huayan quickly told him to stop explaining. She encouraged him to return to the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. Soryong, however, wanted to catch a few more beetles. They had already secured the blister beetle, and once back at the Hall of 10,000 Poisons, Soryong began teaching the warriors how to prepare the medicine. He instructed them to listen carefully and explained that they needed to dry the ground beetles and grind them into powder. 1/10 of that powder was toxic and 3 mo of it could prove fatal. If a person consumed 3/10 of a mo per guan body weight, about half of them would die. Soryong requested that they prepare the medicine using only 1/10 of 1 mo of the poison, about the amount in 10 drops of liquid. To clarify, 1 mo equals 3.75 milligrams, and 1 guan equals 3.75 kilograms. He asked if they understood. Deep down, Soryong felt as if his brain might explode from the complexity. One warrior, removing his mask, remarked that Soryong's explanations were incredibly detailed. They never imagined he would be so skilled in mathematics. The warrior assured Soryong that they would make sure to succeed no matter what. Soryong thanked them, saying he relied on their efforts. Later that evening, Musong was talking to Huayan about how surreal it was that ground beetles had such effects. He mentioned that this made him want to reconsider the poisons in the Tang clan's arsenal. Huayan agreed. Musong then brought up Soryong's remarkable talent in math. Huayan shared how Soryong had calculated the solution's concentration and estimated it to match the weight of 10 drops of liquid. Musong admitted that while he considered himself knowledgeable about poisons, Soryong was on an entirely different level. The more he learned about him, the more he realized what a gem the young man was. Teasing Huayan, Musong asked if she liked Soryong even more now. Huayan blushed, feeling flustered. She admitted that she regretted her hasty judgment in the beginning. Musong replied that as long as she made up for it going forward, that was what mattered. Musong then asked how they planned to test the medicine once it was ready. Huayan turned bright red, almost as if she were a tomato. She mentioned that the branch family elders were saying Soryong had been too insolent. Soryong responded confidently that he'd test it by confronting the clan elders directly. Musong was left speechless, his jaw hanging open in shock. He laughed loudly, finding the boy amusing. The next day, everyone gathered in the hall. The clan elders were doubtful. A warrior handed Soryong a wooden box and explained that he had mixed licorice powder and honey to make the medicine sweeter and easier to consume. Soryong was impressed by how much attention the man had paid to the smallest details. He asked the warrior if he had followed the instructions exactly. The warrior confirmed that he had done so carefully. Other clan members scoffed, saying they were making too big a deal out of it. They even questioned how amazing it could truly be. The patriarch silenced them and then asked Soryong how he planned to prove the medicine's effectiveness. Soryong feigned surprise at the question. The clan elders shouted that it was only natural they needed confirmation. One elder yelled that they would never dare send unverified poison to the city lord of Sichuan. Another elder agreed, adding that if something went wrong it could lead to disaster. Soryang calmly responded that they had no other choice. The warrior understood, but the elders were confused. They grew irritated, feeling as though Soryang was implying they should test it themselves. A loud elder snapped at Soryang, asking if he even understood what that substance was. Another elder commented that Soryang had been out in the world for so long that it seemed like even his insides had turned black. Soryang grinned and called for his grandfather. Museong appeared, asking what he needed. Soryang brought up Museong's earlier statement that those who mastered the Tang clan's martial arts were never afraid of poison. Museong agreed with Soryang's plan and confirmed the statement. Soryang pointed out that the elders' reaction seemed to imply they were afraid. Museong agreed once more. Soryang taunted the great elders of a clan that was surely skilled in mastering 100 poisons. He used reverse psychology, saying that surely they weren't afraid of something as simple as ground beetle poison. This provoked the elder, who then split the medicine into two. He claimed they had no fear of such a trivial poison and consumed it. The elder warned Soryang that if the medicine didn't work, there would be consequences. The elder declared that they would uphold the laws and principles of the clan. They chewed the medicine and a tense silence followed. Then they smirked and declared that nothing was happening. However, one elder felt his manhood stir. The long slumber of the snake was over. Embarrassed, the elders quickly tried to hide their reactions, and from that day on, the clan's laws and principles were firmly set, with a hint of humor. The medicine was sent to the city lord of Sichuan, and its effects were proven to be excellent. A little later, the elders walked through the hall, holding their pants to hide the evidence. Soryang told Museong it had worked just as he had said. By provoking the elders with something related to poison, they had fallen for it immediately. Museong knew that the elders' actions were driven by their pride, but also by their concern for the clan. He advised Soryang not to resent them too much. Museong reminded him that, in the end, they were all family. Soryang nodded, understanding. Huayun hurried in, saying something terrible had happened. They asked what it was, and she explained that their children were acting strange. Soryang turned red and was taken aback. Museong, now serious, called for his grandson-in-law and grabbed him by the collar. He demanded to know what was going on and asked why they had children. Soryang was drenched in cold sweat.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps. And for more content like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see another part. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time. Bye-bye.